All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're diving into a genuinely vivid, dark fantasy, a journey across the mythical Iron Bridge that actually decodes a completely mind-bending psychological allegory. We're tracking a classic hero's myth here, but with a massive twist. This entire epic takes place exclusively within the landscape of the human mind. It's this wild journey where highly abstract psychological concepts are transformed into flesh-and-blood warriors. And we're going to break down exactly how this text uses medieval aesthetics to explain the very structure of our own personalities.
To really set the scene of this epic aesthetic, we have to start right at the threshold between the terrestrial and the supernatural realms. Picture standing on the absolute edge of the known world, where witnesses perceive a gathering storm as a terrifying, dire omen. The text describes an unmistakable roar of wind and thunder that mimics the sound of pounding hooves. It's such a vivid metaphor, right? This storm and its spectral hunters signal that something massive is approaching, a harbinger of plague, war, or even your own impending mortality.
And that brings us to the Iron Bridge itself, which represents a profound psychological threshold. We're not just talking about physical architecture in a fantasy world. This bridge is all about facing the eruptive power of those raw instincts that civilization has so desperately tried to push into the dark. To cross this bridge is to basically encounter the untamed parts of the human psyche. It is the real beginning of our hero's journey straight into the unconscious.
Our protagonist's very first trial out there is the silver wolf. This fierce creature represents a totally primal hunger and the red thrill of rupture. In epic literature, this mirrors the fur Teutonicus, which is that ecstatic, terrifying madness of war embodied by Wotan's massive wolves on the hunt. The silver wolf cares absolutely nothing for the logic of tomorrow. It is a pure predator that seeks only to devour the weak.
So, psychologically speaking, what we're looking at here is the Jungian concept of the shadow, or the Freudian id. Without the constraints of the higher mind, this internal shadow is just a mindless stampede tearing through your psychic wilderness. It's pure, unrefined want. Now, it holds immense power, for sure, but it desperately needs a sovereign's guiding hand to turn all that chaotic, destructive energy into a purposeful drive.
Standing directly against this furious beast is our second figure, the High Seneschal. If the wolf is chaos, well, the seneschal is pure order. He's a cold architect who uses strategic reason to navigate the madness. He doesn't fight with teeth and claws. He fights with intellect, systems, and rigid structures.
This specific friction perfectly captures the brutal internal battles of the human mind. The text actually compares the seneschal to the mythological ravens Hugin and Munin, the intellectual and mnemonic scouts of the divine chase. By scouting ahead, he works to transform the wolf's primal frenzy into a highly calculated search for truth and information. It's literally the ultimate battle of primal frenzy versus calculated reason.
In psychological terms, the High Seneschal is the ego. By polishing his reflection, this ego-driven architect believes he can actually negotiate with the absolute vacuum that exists at the center of our being. The ego's entire job is to be the conscious desire for order, serving as this critical, fragile bridge between the wild, eruptive unconscious and the rigid rules of the civilized world.
But, as we all know, reason alone isn't nearly enough to govern the psyche. Enter our third figure, the Pale Inquisitor. This guy is a terrifying martyr who carries the incredible, leaden burden of absolute law. He mirrors the spectral hunt's unrelenting pursuit of the dishonorable. He's the one hunting down the traitors and cowards who are denied a peaceful rest.
The Inquisitor perfectly embodies the superego. He is a rigid, unforgiving moral enforcer. To him, the shadow isn't just an animal instinct, it's a divine scourge intended to crush the unworthy. He firmly believes that suffering and total erasure are literally the only path to appease the silent gods of the afterlife. His terrifying presence ensures that even the most disharmonious threads of fate are forced into cosmic order.
Let's just pause and reflect on this for a second. Ask yourself, what unrefined wants are you pushing deep into your own psychic wilderness just to satisfy your internal inquisitor? It's a pretty stark reminder of how our own psychological components, our primal urges, our rational mind, and our harsh inner critic are just relentlessly battling it out within us every single day.
So, what exactly happens when these three fierce forces, the wolf, the seneschal, and the inquisitor, finally clash? Well, they strike the silent guardian known as the Black Knight, and what they discover is a vacuum. The Black Knight acts as the ultimate psychopomp, standing completely still at the very center of the bridge, just waiting in the abyss.
It's truly fascinating how perfectly the epic narrative symbols map onto modern psychological concepts. Think about it. You've got Odin's spectral army acting as the eruptive unconscious, the ravens standing in for the ego's reason, and the legend of the Oscoria representing kinetic memory and wholeness. This seamless blending of ancient myth and modern psychology is exactly what makes the source material so incredibly powerful. The Black Knight's entire role is a process of unification. Operating a lot like Odin in his shamanic origins, the Black Knight is a guide between worlds. He gathers up the marginalized host, from those who died tragically to victims of violence. He mediates for the restless dead, and ultimately, he integrates the id, ego, and superego to combine them all into a single, unified entity.
And by gathering these warring parts, the ultimate transformation finally occurs. He becomes the synthesized sovereign. This is the absolute culmination of the hero's mythic journey. Notice that he doesn't kill the Silver Wolf, and he doesn't banish the Pale Inquisitor. Actually, scratch that. It's more like he literally wears the shadow as his own skin. In doing so, the Psychopomp provides a mythological home for the fragment itself, making sure that nothing is truly lost.
Ultimately, what we have here is a masterclass on individuation. That's the psychological rebirth you achieve by taking all those fearsome, conflicting internal images and integrating them into a single, resilient personality. It is beautifully symbolized by the true knight, the one who can finally walk away from the Iron Bridge completely whole, having fully mastered the storm inside.
I absolutely love this next metaphor. His inner light is merely the friction of his darkness rubbing against the laws of a cold world. Wow. It perfectly explains that the past is never truly buried, you know? Instead, it rides along as a kinetic memory within the seeker. The darkness isn't destroyed at all. It actually becomes the very source of the hero's illumination.
Which brings us to the core stylistic brilliance of the text. By using the sheer power of personification, it externalizes our internal friction. It takes abstract morals and turns them into visceral, epic battles. By framing the human mind as a brutal medieval battlefield, we learn how to actively harness our primal energy instead of just being helplessly overwhelmed by the storm. It makes the completely invisible struggles of the mind entirely visible. And that brings us to the end of our journey across the Iron Bridge. So if you faced the spectral gale of your own mind tonight, would you be consumed by the storm, or would you emerge as the synthesized sovereign? It's a dark, super fascinating thought to leave you with, really urging all of us to bravely face our own internal shadows, integrate our fragmented pieces, and achieve true psychological wholeness. Thanks for hanging out with me on this explanator, and I'll catch you next time.